Hi, this is Maria Williams with a Valentine's Day card that could easily be turned into a sending love card for a different occasion. I have made two different versions. The one on the left is a little bit more feminine, and the one on the right a little bit more masculine. Here's the card that I have already made. We actually made this card in one of my classes a little earlier this month. It has a little envelope on the front that is really easy to make, and it has a little card that fits inside that says Love's in the Air. As you can see, you can still open and close the envelope, so it's a little bit of an interactive card. And I already had this type of card in mind, and then I got my paper pumpkin, so I decided to use the love stamp from there and the little hearts as well as the Happy Valentine's Day sentiment. Here is a sample of what the paper pumpkin kit makes. I don't have mine sealed in the back, but it's a little treat container with some little banners and punch out hearts that you can stamp with several sentiments, and these arrows that I will show you how to make on your own if you don't have the kit. I'm going to start with the front panel, which is basically a piece of Whisper White cardstock that I have cut to 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/2. And I'm using this sort of splatter stamp from the Awesomely Artistic stamp set, but you could use any kind of spatter. You could use one from Gorgeous Grunge or any of the other ones that you might have from another set. And I'm going to combine it with some pink Pirouette ink to create just a little bit of texture on the background. The Paper Pumpkin kit comes with Blushing Bride ink, and that's the cardstock on the left, but I like Pink Pirouette a little bit better for this because I'm using it with red and Pool Party, which are brighter colors, so that's why I'm going with the Pink Pirouette. So I'm basically going to ink up my stamp and just stamp kind of in the pattern that the hearts are going to go in. So from the left lower corner on up to the right upper corner, but I'm also going to add a few splatters on the bottom and the right hand side. While I have my pink ink out, I'm going to take the little card that fits in the envelope, and I'm going to take the love stamp and ink it up and stamp that onto the card. And then I will take the It's in the Air sentiment that is from the Blooming Love stamp set. I have trimmed off the heart just to make it easier to stamp. I can always reassemble the full stamp on my block if I want to stamp the heart with the sentiment. And I'm going to ink that sentiment with black archival ink and stamp it onto the card, overlapping the pink heart just a little bit. With the same black archival ink, I'm going to take the Happy Valentine's Day sentiment and stamp it onto some Whisper White cardstock. And I'm going to use the smallest circle of the Layering Circles Framelits Dies set to cut this out. It's a little bit bigger than an inch. I found that my 1 inch punch was a little bit too small for this. So I'm using the die. To do the embossing on my panel, I'm going to take my base plate and I'm going to open up tab 2. I'm going to use the Happy Heart embossing folder. And I only want about 2 rows of hearts on my card. I don't want to emboss the entire panel. So I'm going to open the embossing folder and I'm going to make sure that I have the side of it that has the raised hearts. And I'm going to make sure that the back of my paper is up against those raised hearts. And then I can just close it up and look through it and make sure that the paper is perfectly straight. And then I just sandwich it in between 2 acrylic plates. I find it easier to prepare my embossing folders like this in between the 2 acrylic plates and then put them on the base plate rather than put on 1 acrylic plate, then my embossing folder on my paper on top, and then try to get my fingers out of the way to place the additional acrylic plate. Also, I always run the folded edge of my embossing folder through the machine first because that way if it's not perfectly folded, I'm not putting a whole lot of pressure on the folded edge of the embossing folder, which could crack it. So there you see that my heart's embossed perfectly, and now I am ready to prepare some of the elements that are going to go on the card front. First, I'm going to take my really old 1 1/4 inch punch and punch out a circle of red. On my original card, it was punched out of Pink Pirouette, and I'm just going to use dimensionals in between the layers. To create the mini envelope that will go on the front of the card, I'm taking a piece of soft suede designer series paper from the Basics pack, and I'm cutting out a 3-inch square. Then I'm taking a ruler and I'm lining it up with two opposite corners to mark the middle. I'm going to do this on both diagonals so that I can get the center of the square. This center part is going to be the back of the envelope, so you will not be able to see these marks. And then I'm going to take two opposite corners and fold them into that center point. I'm then going to fold these two flaps in the opposite direction because I want the polka dots on the outside of my envelope. And then I have to fold the other two sides, and I want to fold around this area. I want to overlap a little bit, and so I'm going to place this into my paper trimmer and just use my scoring blade to score at about a 1/4 inch from that little corner area right there. I'll run my scoring blade over it several times to make sure I have a good fold, and then I will flip my paper over and do the exact same thing, again lining that corner up with the 1/4 inch line. And now I can just go ahead and fold those two flaps in, and it already looks like an envelope. I am going to go ahead and trim off a little bit of the envelope. I'm just going to trim off these two small areas where the papers overlap, and they're kind of hard to see on the pattern paper. So what I'm doing is taking a pencil and just marking those lines with a pencil. They're going to be cut, so they're not going to show at all. And then I'm just taking my small scissors and trimming those out. Now I'm going to fold it up and make sure that my little card fits in the envelope, and I actually need to trim off a little bit, so I'm going to just take it to the paper trimmer and trim the bottom off. The perfect dimensions for a little card that fits into that size envelope are 2 inches by 1 3/4 inches. This one ended up being a little bit smaller because I stamped the heart in the opposite direction, but it'll be just fine. Next, I'm going to wrap some twine around my envelope, and you could use a glue dot or a little bit of adhesive to close the envelope first, but it's really not necessary. So I'm wrapping the twine around a couple of times and then just making a knot and then a bow. Once I trimmed off the end of my bow, I realized that my twine was had some bends in it, and I remembered that my good friend and neighbor and fellow demonstrator Linda Edwards had given me some of this embroidery floss wax, and it has these grooves and a wax ring, and so you just kind of run your twine through the grooves so that it picks up some of the wax, and then it helps your twine or your embroidery floss be straight. So here you can see that it made a difference, and now my ends look nice and neat. Okay, so moving on with the card, now I am going to add the hearts to the card around the envelope. And on my original card, I used the heart border punch to punch out a bunch of little hearts. And I also used a couple of punches that unfortunately have been discontinued by Stampin' Up, but I still have them, of course. And for this card, I decided to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to show you how you can use the heart stencil to add the hearts instead. The first thing I'm going to do is take my Real Red ink and stamp the tiny hearts from the Paper Pumpkin stamp set up in the upper right hand corner. Since the hearts are small and fairly close together, I'm using a sponge dauber, and I've just inked it up and then selected one of the small hearts to stencil, and then I'm just moving the stencil and filling in as I go, and then when I get closer to where the envelope is going to be, I will just do some larger hearts. I've put my envelope in place so that I can kind of check the placement of my hearts, and I'm going to stencil one onto the envelope itself. Now this one will turn out a little bit darker than the others, and you will be able to see the pattern on the paper just a little bit, but I don't think it's a big deal. So once I'm done with that one, I'm going to add a couple more hearts around the envelope. And as usually happens, I have a little boo-boo at the end. But I have a plan to cover it with the arrow, so I'm not going to try to cover it up or remove it or anything. I'm just going to leave it and keep going with the card. I'm using one of the sticks from the Paper Pumpkin kit. If you don't have it, you can use a large toothpick or a small skewer. I have some that are regular skewers. They're very similar in size. And I'm cutting a 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch approximately piece of glimmer paper in gold. And I'm just folding it in half so I get symmetrical sides to my arrow. And I'm just cutting on the diagonal two parallel lines so that I get the back of the arrow. And then you could leave it like this and just attach it, or you can take your small snips and just cut some lines. It's easier to see what you're doing if you have the white part facing you. Next, I'm taking a gold Sharpie. I just had this in my stash. I use it for my Christmas tags sometimes. So I've had it for a while, and I'm just using it to color the stick. And you do have to be a little careful. It will get on your finger. So I'm just using the piece of glimmer paper that I have already prepared to keep my hands clean and get the stick painted all the way around. And really, you could just paint about 3/4 of it because the bottom part that's up against the card is not going to show, but I like to have it finished all the way around. And then when I've got that all painted, I'm taking a couple of glue dots and attaching them to the back of the glimmer paper, and then I'm attaching that to my stick. And then the only thing that is left is the tip of the arrow. And for that, I'm simply going to use one of the heart punches and punch out a heart and attach a couple of glue dots to the back of the glimmer paper and attach it to the tip of the stick. Now that the arrow's done, I can just use a couple more glue dots to attach it to my card and then attach the envelope on top. To keep the envelope as flat as possible, I'm going to attach it to the front panel with dimensionals. And rather than try to figure out where the dimensionals need to go on the back of the envelope, I'm just placing the dimensionals on either side of the arrow and then placing the envelope on top. Next, I'm attaching the two circles that I cut previously, and I put a little bit of snail on the back of the red circle. And then I'm going to grab my card base and two strips, 2 1/2 inch strips of designer series paper that I have prepared. When I'm attaching strips like this, I like to leave them longer than my card. I just find it easier to hold on to the paper, and then I only have to worry about lining up one side rather than three. So I just attach it to the edge of the card, and then I'm going to attach the other strip to the middle of the card, and then trim off the edges. I'm adding a pretty good amount of snail adhesive onto the card base, and then I'm just going to take the front panel and attach it, press it down well. And then I decided that I wanted one more heart. It looked a little empty on the left side, so I'm just grabbing my stencil again and adding one more heart. If you wanted to, you could wait for these hearts to dry and add a little bit of Wink of Stella. But that's what I did on my first card. But I decided to make this a more masculine card. So my husband always tells me I get a little too frou-frou. So I decided to leave the hearts plain. I'm keeping the inside of the cards pretty simple, so I'm just using the Sunshine Sayings bundle. I'm using this Love die cut out of red cardstock. You could also cut it out of white and sponge it like this one. And then I'm just using the U from the stamp set. If you don't have this bundle, you could just use the Bloom in Love stamp set if you had that, and use one of the smaller sentiments, the Be Mine or Love You or something like that. Here are the two cards again so you can see them and compare. Which one do you like best? Please leave me a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. If you would like to see more pictures or purchase any of the products used in this video, please visit my blog at mariascardsandmore.com. Thanks for watching.